Story 1. Here's my petty revenge story from the 80s. My parents moved pretty often around a very small part of a Midwestern state, so I went to many tiny schools that varied wildly in how well they taught their students. In between my freshman and sophomore year, we moved to the largest town in our area. I went from being in a freshman class of just 25 students to a class of 300 students. It was a huge culture shock for me. None of the schools I had attended had any kind of drama club or classes. I had no frame of reference for any kind of theater-type stuff, or many things that happened in the much larger school system really. So my English teacher was the drama class club queen. Drama is her life. She works with local colleges to produce plays and stages yearly plays at the high school. She does community theater with all the local students, and she has favorites. She is not shy about who she likes and who she hates. She would always fix the schedules so her favorite drama kids got her English class because she was so integral to their lives and crucial to their development, which I thought was extra weird. Drama clubs seemed a little culty. Also, sometimes she would expose a kid who had messed up in a play during class. She was a mean bully who played favorites. I did very well in my English classes with her and was even bored somewhat by the curriculum. By about mid-year, this drama teacher pulled me aside and said I should have been in a tougher class. She said there were no spots in the high-track class, but that she would sit me in front of her desk. She would then teach me a little extra on the side so I wouldn't miss out. She said she would make sure I got into high track my junior year. I was pretty excited to be singled out in such a huge class. I was also excited at the idea of high track for my next year. I really enjoyed English classes generally. Well, the extra work was totally bogus. She handed me the Scarlet Pimpernel and told me to write a report. The book was boring, and I wasn't getting extra credit for it. I didn't much like her as a teacher. I quit reading the extra work that was only for me to do in this class and just pretended like I hadn't agreed to it. She also quit talking about extra work, but she kept me front and center at her desk. I realized that next to me was her favorite student, the star of our little drama club. Let's call him Nick. She had been coaching Nick on drama since middle school, and she would often tell us Nick would one day win an Oscar. Nick would always reply that he would thank her in his acceptance speech from the podium. She would smile and pat him and praise him. They had little secret jokes between themselves they would make mid-class. It was really weird. So I come back from Christmas break, and we are taking our first big test for the semester when it happens. Nick casually leaned towards me and said in a quiet voice, "Hey, what is the answer to question 8? He's not speaking in a normal tone of voice, but he's not whispering. I am sitting right in front of the teacher's desk. I could have reached out and touched it with a foot. I looked at Nick and then looked at the drama teacher. I waited and waited. She sat there as if she hadn't heard a thing. None of the students near us said anything either. Totally surreal. If I got caught cheating, I knew my mother would tear me up. But did it count as cheating if I just told this guy the answer? So I dusted off the Gen X motto and said, whatever. I gave him the answer and waited for her to send us to the office or something. She just sat there so pleased with herself. I kept waiting for her to say something, and as the semester went on, Nick kept asking for the answers to more and more questions on tests. Now I'm reviewing what has happened in this class, and I'm realizing she figured out that I was good in this class and got me next to her future Oscar winner explicitly to help him cheat. As the semester goes on, I studied harder and went with the flow, but I was pretty mad. She had straight up used me because I was the new kid. I had a plan. A modest proposal, if you will. I started whispering the harder stuff to Nick so he wouldn't have to ask so much and would even angle my paper so he could see it better. All semester long, I wanted him to not worry about a single answer on any test. I wanted his cheating experience to be smooth as silk, and she was thrilled that I figured out what she wanted. Then it was finals time. Even though we were just high school students, we were in a university town, so it was modeled on the university style. The final had a huge weight on our overall grade. I gave him entirely wrong answers. Absurdly wrong answers, in fact, while she sat right in front of me. I guess he had long ago stopped doing anything with the class material because he just wrote everything I said down. She was a good actor because she must have been screaming inside listening to me. She never flinched or even raised her eyes to me. She never indicated she knew what was happening. I enjoyed it so much. It felt so great. The most fun I ever had taking a test. When the bell rang, she looked up and looked right at me. I just smiled and smiled right back at her. The aftermath. I have always wondered what she did about his test. There is simply no way she flunked him. I am positive he failed that test badly. She got me back though. I was never allowed in AP English or high-track English my entire high school career. I was pissed, but it was worth it. Nick ended up going to New York because the stage called to him. He got on a few shows, but ended up nowhere. The best part though, there was someone in that class who did make it pretty big in Hollywood. It wasn't Nick, and it wasn't me. Just a quiet kid who sat in the back of the class the whole time. I don't think I ever spoke to them the whole time we were in school together. This kid was very introverted, and not someone who you'd think Hollywood. But every time I see this person getting Hollywood accolades, I toast to Nick, future Oscar winner, and the drama teacher who nearly coached someone who made it. That must have really burned her up. Story 2. I reported to work on a Monday as the site supervisor for an armed security account, only to discover that the night shift employees had left an empty coffee pot. Not only that, but they had completely depleted my coffee supply, leaving behind an empty container devoid of my much-needed morning caffeine. The inconsiderate individuals didn't even consider replenishing it. Grumbling, I headed to the local market to get some caffeine to keep me going through a busy day. I was in uniform, which consisted of black pants, a dress shirt with my badge and various security emblems, and my duty belt, which held my firearm, baton, handcuffs, and other equipment. To avoid alarming anyone with my firearm, I wore a windbreaker with security emblazoned in 6-inch high, bright yellow letters across the back. In other words, I looked nothing like the employees at the market, who wore a uniform of green aprons. Now, perhaps I could have handled things better, but it was Monday morning, and I hadn't yet had any coffee. While standing near the entrance of the market, reading the menu board of their small cafe, an entitled woman, whom we'll call the entitled shopper, approached me while on her phone. She handed me a slip of paper, which I took out of curiosity. Without saying a word or even looking at me, she made a dismissive gesture and went to sit on a nearby bench. The slip of paper turned out to be, of all things, a grocery list. Perplexed, I walked over and politely asked her what the list was for and why she handed it to me. The entitled shopper responded, "That's my grocery list, of course. Go fetch them for me. I'm in a hurry and can't be bothered. I'm on a very important phone call, accompanied by another dismissive wave. I've been a customer at this market for nearly 5 years, and I knew they didn't offer personal shopping services." After a brief moment of consideration, I rolled her list into a tight little ball, dropped it on her lap, and firmly told her to handle her own shopping. I turned to leave as she started yelling something behind me, but I ignored her. At this point, I thought she would finally realize her error. I assumed the bright yellow letters on my jacket would clue her in. But no, she wasn't that observant. Instead, she chased me down, yelling about how she was going to get me fired if I didn't fetch her groceries immediately. Trying to remain calm, I firmly explained that I didn't work there and advised her to do her own shopping. Satisfied that the situation was over, I continued to the cafe to get some coffee and then went to browse the coffee aisle. Just as I was about to make my selection, the entitled shopper returned, this time with a man who seemed to be a manager. She was loudly berating him, insisting that I be fired on the spot for refusing to serve her. The poor gentleman, looking baffled, glanced at me and then back at her, explaining, "He doesn't work here, we don't employ security staff." Amused, I gave her a cheerful wave and agreed with him. She lost her temper entirely, screaming about how I needed to fetch her groceries immediately and how we'd regret treating her poorly. The gentleman attempted to clarify again, asserting that I didn't work at the market and wasn't obligated to assist her. Finally, it seemed to register, albeit faintly. However, her entitlement quickly overpowered any realization, and she haughtily retorted, "Well, he's obviously some kind of worker, make him do it." At that point, I lost my patience. I firmly gestured my displeasure and told her to handle her own business. The gentleman stepped between us and, in a raised voice, informed her again that I didn't work there and that she needed to leave. The entitled shopper shrieked, demanding to see someone in charge so she could have us all fired, threatening legal action if she didn't get her groceries. The gentleman, whom I assumed was the manager, firmly stated that he was the owner, that his family had owned the store for 20 years, and they had never offered personal shopping services. He then took her by the arm and escorted her toward the front of the store. I was left shaking my head in disbelief. I picked out my coffee and went to pay. At the register, the owner approached me, apologizing for the incident, and we shared a moment of mutual astonishment. We ended up laughing about how absurd the situation was. He even offered the coffee to me free of charge, but I thanked him, assuring him it wasn't his fault. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? But as we stepped outside, who should be waiting for us but the entitled shopper, this time with the police. She was out there yelling at an officer, demanding we be arrested for refusing to serve her, insisting that she'd sue us. My jaw dropped. I could hardly believe it. I even started laughing. As it turned out, I recognized the responding officer, Officer Betsy, with whom I'd worked on various cases. I waved to her, and she approached, asking me what was going on. Both the owner and I explained the situation, and the owner requested that the entitled shopper be removed from the property as she was creating a disturbance. Officer Betsy rolled her eyes and instructed the entitled shopper to leave immediately or face trespassing charges. Then, a moment unfolded that I couldn't believe. The entitled shopper jabbed her finger into Officer Betsy's chest, not once but twice. Officer Betsy quickly responded, subduing the woman, handcuffing her, and placing her in the patrol car. The entitled shopper continued screaming, thrashing, and kicking the car windows as Officer Betsy drove away. Later that day, I saw Officer Betsy, who informed me that the entitled shopper had continued her disruptive behavior at the station and resisted the officers. Eventually, they had to restrain her, and she was transported to a hospital for a mental health evaluation. I never found out what happened to her after that. Story 3. Backstory: I am self-employed and run 2 businesses. I recently bought myself an almost new BMW G31 530D. The car was only 6 months old with only 6,000 kilometers on the odometer. I also run a used car dealership specializing in German vehicles, alongside my other business. Since my father was a passionate BMW driver, it felt natural for me to follow in his footsteps when it came to cars. Back to the story. One day, I was on my way home from work around 6 p.m. and started to feel hungry. I still had about 150 kilometers left to drive and didn't want to wait until late for dinner. So, I decided to stop at a gas station located directly on the Autobahn motorway or highway and found a fast food restaurant with a drive-in counter. I ordered my dinner and parked my car, then opened the back door and sat in the trunk to enjoy my meal. Not long after I sat down, an old minivan pulled up beside me. A woman opened her door, looked at me with apparent disapproval, but I didn't think much of it and continued eating. Suddenly, she approached me and said, "Entitled woman, excuse me, what are you doing here?" Me: "Hello there, I'm just having my dinner. Nothing special." Entitled woman: "Where is the owner of this car?" Me: "That would be me. Why? Is something wrong?" Entitled woman: "Don't lie to me. How can a young person like you own something as expensive as that? Besides, you don't look German, so you must have stolen it." For context, I have a slightly darker complexion, as my mother is part Asian. Me? Well, She cut me off. Entitled woman: "I don't want to hear any more lies. I'm calling the police, and they'll arrest you if you don't hand me the keys so I can return the car to its rightful owner." Me? Go ahead and call them. I honestly thought she was joking, but she actually did call the police. They arrived about 20 minutes later. A policewoman and a policeman got out of their patrol car, which, ironically, was the same model BMW I was driving, just painted in police colors. The policewoman came over to me first, asking if everything was all right and requesting an explanation of what had happened from my perspective. Just as I began to explain, the entitled woman approached us, interrupting and accusing me of being a liar before I could even get a word out. Entitled woman, why are you being so nice to him? He stole that car. He's surely not even old enough to drive. Don't waste any time, arrest him and hand me the keys. I know the car's owner, and I'll return it to him right now. Policewoman, ma'am, please calm down. I won't arrest someone just because you tell me to. I'm here to do my job, which means first asking him a few questions, and then we'll see what happens. But for now, I'm asking you to step aside so I can talk to him. Entitled woman, why should I talk to him? Just do your job. I'm a citizen of this country, and I pay your salary. Do what I ask. Yes, she actually said that. Policeman, ma'am, don't you realize that you're acting strangely right now, while this gentleman has been calm and quiet the whole time? If you continue like this, you'll face serious consequences. After that, the entitled woman went with the policeman, while the policewoman asked me again about what had happened. I explained that the entitled woman thought I had stolen the car, even claiming I didn't have a driver's license, and that her behavior had even been a bit prejudiced against me. The policewoman was understanding and asked for my ID, driver's license, and the car's paperwork. After I handed her everything, she went to the patrol car to verify the documents. While she checked, I waited, passing the time on my phone. A few minutes later, she returned, confirmed everything was fine, and asked if I wanted to press charges for her inappropriate remarks. I declined, as I simply wanted to finish my dinner and head home. The policeman came over, and they discussed the situation. It was clear the woman had made false accusations against me, and they informed me I was free to leave since I hadn't done anything wrong. As I moved to close the back door of my car, the entitled woman returned, tried to reach into my pockets, and shouted, "Where are the keys? You don't deserve this car. I'll take it from you now. Go steal another car and fool the police again." I couldn't believe someone would act so outrageously. The police quickly handcuffed her and placed her in their patrol car. They asked if I was okay and if I still wanted to avoid pressing charges. This time, I decided to press charges, considering her actions a personal attack. Afterward, I drove home, hoping she'd face consequences for her behavior or possibly receive mental health support if needed. Story 4. Hey, everyone, I've got a wild story to share with you all. The other night, I was just hanging out at home, minding my own business, when suddenly, all chaos broke loose in the neighborhood. Here's the context. My next-door neighbors, John and Maria, have the sweetest dog named Bella. Bella is a loving and protective mama Rottweiler, and she had just given birth to a litter of adorable puppies a few weeks ago. Everyone in the neighborhood was excited about the little furballs. But then there's this one neighbor, Karen, who lives a few houses down. She's one of those entitled types, always expecting things to go her way. Even before Bella gave birth, Karen had been pressuring John and Maria to give her one of the puppies for her kids, but they refused. They wanted Bella's puppies to go to loving homes and weren't about to just hand them out, especially not to Karen and her mischievous children. A few weeks before the big incident, Maria and I were chatting over the fence on a sunny day. We were talking about Bella's pregnancy and how cute the puppies were going to be. Then, out of nowhere, Karen strolled over. "Hey, Maria, I heard your dog's having puppies. How exciting. I was wondering if you could give one to my kids. They've been begging for a dog, and these puppies would be perfect for them," Karen said with a big smile. Maria, looking a bit hesitant, replied, "Oh, hi, Karen. Well, we're really happy about the puppies, but we're planning to find good homes for them with responsible and caring families. Maria is one of the nicest people I know, but she can stand her ground when it matters. Karen's smile faltered for a moment, and she continued, "Oh, come on, it's just one puppy, and my kids would take great care of it. Besides, it's not like you need so many puppies around here." "Actually," Maria replied calmly, "we take our responsibility as pet owners very seriously. We want to ensure that each puppy goes to a loving home where they will be well cared for." Karen huffed and crossed her arms. "Well, I don't see why you're being so difficult about it. You have Bella and all these puppies coming your way, so one won't make a difference." Maria's tone remained calm. "Every puppy makes a difference, Karen. They're all precious lives, and we want the best for them." "But my kids really want one. You're just being selfish," Karen snapped, her entitled attitude starting to show. Maria didn't back down. "I'm sorry, Karen, but it's not about being selfish. We want what's best for the puppies, and that means finding loving and responsible homes for each one." Karen muttered something under her breath and stomped away, clearly annoyed she didn't get what she wanted. She tried a few more times to pressure Maria and John, but each time they politely refused. It was clear to me that Karen didn't fully grasp the responsibilities of owning a pet, and I couldn't help but feel concerned about any animal that might end up in her care. Dogs need love, attention, and proper training, and Karen seemed more interested in getting what she wanted than considering the puppy's well-being. Now, let's get to the main event of the story. One night, after Bella had given birth to her adorable puppies, Karen decided to take matters into her own hands. She dressed in all black, like some sort of puppy napping ninja, and sneaked into John and Maria's yard. Can you believe it? She actually broke into their house, thinking they wouldn't notice if one of the puppies went missing. Now, here's where things get interesting. Bella is one fierce and protective mother. As soon as Karen got close to the puppies, Bella sensed something was wrong. She went into full guard dog mode, barking and growling with all her might. It was like something out of an action movie. Karen started screaming as Bella charged at her, biting and holding her down. It was a showdown between a protective mama and an entitled intruder. Meanwhile, I was just relaxing at home when I heard all the commotion outside. Concerned, I peeked out my window to see what was happening. Let me tell you, I was in for quite a spectacle. I saw Karen lying on the ground, struggling with Bella. She had tried to run, but Bella had caught up to her and pinned her down in the yard. It was almost comical, but I knew it was serious. I immediately grabbed my phone and called 911. After all, who wouldn't call the police when they see someone getting attacked by a dog? As I spoke to the dispatcher, I saw John and Maria running down the stairs, looking panicked and worried. I opened my door and called out to them. "Hey, your dog is going wild on someone in your yard." They rushed over, and just as they did, police sirens blared in the distance. The officers arrived quickly and managed to pull Bella away from Karen, who was still lying on the ground, making a scene. The police questioned John, Maria, and me, trying to understand what had happened. They asked if there was any evidence to explain why Bella had attacked Karen. Of course, I offered to let them check my security cameras. Karen, on the other hand, was trying to play the victim, claiming Bella attacked her for no reason. "Oh, please." We all knew what she was up to, and the police could see through her lies, especially since my cameras had captured her sneaking into John and Maria's yard. Thankfully, Bella's puppies were safe, cuddled up in their cozy spot in the house. The police even called animal control just to make sure everything was handled correctly. But since we had already managed to get Bella off Karen, they didn't need to take further action. As the situation calmed down, John and Maria shared with the police the history of Karen's attempts to get a puppy from them. They showed the messages and calls where she had practically begged for one. I overheard Karen telling the police, "Well, they didn't want to give me a puppy, so I thought I'd just take one for my kids. They have so many, they wouldn't even notice, right?" What an entitled mindset. You can't just take someone's puppies because they didn't give you one. That's plain wrong. The police weren't convinced by her excuses. They placed her in handcuffs, and because of the bites she received from Bella, an ambulance was called to take her to the hospital. I couldn't help but chuckle at the irony. who breaks into a home to steal a puppy and expects everything to go smoothly. John and Maria were shaken, but relieved that Bella had protected her puppies and that the police were on their side. They thanked me for calling 911 and being a good neighbor. Of course, I was happy to help. That's what neighbors are for. In the end, Karen faced the consequences of her actions. She was charged with breaking and entering, attempted theft, and a few other charges. Her attempt to claim it was an unprovoked dog attack was quickly dismissed in court. The evidence showed that Bella was only protecting her family. The whole neighborhood buzzed about this incident for days. Everyone was relieved that Bella and her puppies were safe, and Karen had been caught red-handed. As for Bella, she became something of a local hero. People would stop by to say hello to her and even bring treats. She became the neighborhood's mascot, and we all adored her. I hope Karen learned her lesson. And after those 3 years in jail, I hope she'll think twice before pulling another stunt like that. Story 5. Backstory: I work at a unique retail store in the heart of town, where our dedicated customers often travel long distances to visit. Because of this, a clear and accessible parking lot is essential for our business. However, our next-door neighbors, a family-owned landscaping and garden supply store, have been a constant challenge when it comes to parking. The tension between my boss and the landscaping store owner has been brewing for over a decade, long before I joined the team, all over a minor issue. I heard the landscaper once complained about a tree on our side of the lot that he found unattractive for his customers. It was the most trivial neighbor dispute imaginable, but it lingered for years. Things came to a head after business in town began to pick up again post-pandemic. Our parking lot started to fill up with cars, many belonging to the landscaping store's customers. Our 2 parking lots are connected, and while ours is about twice the size, the landscaper had decided to reserve almost all his spots for his landscaping vans. Ironically, those vans are rarely there during business hours, so his customers often parked in our lot, leaving limited spaces for our own visitors. My boss, aiming to be reasonable, approached the landscaper with a suggestion. Perhaps they could adjust their parking arrangement to free up a few spots for customers. He even offered to let the landscaper's vans park in our lot if they ever needed the extra space. However, the landscaper shot down the idea, insisting it was absolutely crucial to reserve all his spots for his vans, despite their absence during the day. The conversation grew tense, ending with my boss threatening to put up a fence to separate the lots and enforce parking. The landscaper, practically daring him, retorted, "Go ahead." Both men walked off in frustration, not speaking for 2 years. The solution: recently, we were presented with a golden opportunity when a parking management company approached us with a proposal. They offered to install automated license plate cameras to enforce parking, allowing us to find vehicles that stayed beyond a generous 3-hour free window if they hadn't paid. The setup would be free, with most of the revenue coming to us, and they would retain any fines issued. It was an ideal solution, as it wouldn't impact neighboring stores' customers and would allow us to grant extensions at our discretion. For the cameras to work, they needed to cover both our entrance and the landscaping store's entrance. Trying to be a good neighbor again, my boss had the parking company representative reach out to the landscaper to explain the plan and its benefits. True to form, the landscaper cut off the rep mid-sentence, making it very clear that he did not want his lot to become a paid parking zone. Instead of investing in an expensive fence, my boss had a better idea: big rocks. A construction buddy had leftover rocks from a recent project and offered to place them for a great price. The parking company even agreed to front the cost, to be repaid from future parking revenue. Early Monday morning, before business hours, one of my boss's friend's employees, a big, burly man with arms like tree trunks, arrived with a truck and crane to place the rocks. They were neatly spaced to allow pedestrians to pass with carts, but completely blocked vehicle access. The landscaper came storming out, yelling and trying to intimidate the worker into stopping. But the worker, unfazed, calmly told him to step back for safety, which made the much smaller landscaper back down. The outcome: The rocks didn't just serve as a physical barrier. They became a mental obstacle for the landscaper's employees. Their muscle memory kept leading them into our lot, only to realize too late that they couldn't drive through. From our newly installed surveillance cameras, we watched, trying not to laugh, as their vans ended up awkwardly stuck. They'd have to reverse out and go all the way around to their entrance, only to perform a series of complicated maneuvers to park in their now reduced space. At one point, we even saw one of their rushing vans clip a rock while trying to maneuver a small bonus for our viewing pleasure. The following day, the parking company arrived to install the license plate cameras and set up the signage, which took a few hours. Throughout the installation, members of the landscaper's family were hovering around our lot, snapping photos and videos as if they were looking for a violation. However, the parking company was very professional and followed every regulation, leaving them nothing to report. Meanwhile, my boss was positively glowing as he helped direct the installation. Here's the best part. We noticed that the landscaper's family began parking their personal vehicles in our lot, likely out of spite. One day, my coworker saw one of their family members dash out of their store and sprint to their car. It seemed odd, but we didn't think much of it until the following week, when the landscaper's son walked into our store looking a bit embarrassed. He had overstayed the 3-hour limit and received a $150 fine. The son practically begged us to waive it, claiming it was a simple mistake. My boss replied politely, "Oh, I'd love to help, but it's out of our control now. The parking company manages all fines." The look on his face was priceless. Shoulders slumped, he retreated back to their store. Since then, our lot has remained blissfully clear, and our customers have had no trouble finding parking. Meanwhile, the landscapers have been grumbling, now struggling to maneuver their vans. My boss, he's been smiling a lot more lately. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply letting people get exactly what they asked for. Story 6. This story is from my early days working as a technician for an internet provider company, and it still brings a smile to my face when I think about it, especially since I recently had a technician come to install my internet, which brought it all back. Back then, I worked mostly in residential buildings, and my job was pretty straightforward. I'd go to the basement, find our distribution box, patch the cable to the correct endpoint for the designated apartment, then head to the apartment itself. There, I'd fix the cable outlet if needed, check that the cable was live, ensuring the correct signal was coming through. This is pretty important. Connect the modem, verify that everything was working, and finally, let the happy customer know that their internet was ready to use before heading to my next job. One day, I was on a job when I encountered a classic know-it-all customer. Right from the start, it was clear this guy was going to be difficult. First, I called him to get access to the building, and he immediately assured me he knew exactly where our distribution box was. He then led me directly to the electricity provider's box instead. After that, he was absolutely certain that his apartment number was Roman 20, while my paperwork clearly stated it was YI, and indeed, it was YI. He continued offering more help along the way, but I'll spare you the details to keep this from turning into a novel. Eventually, we made it to his apartment. I was just about to check the signal when he started rushing me. "Come on, hurry up, I need my connection to work on something really important," he insisted. I explained that I needed to test the signal first, but then he presented me with an opportunity for some subtle compliance. He said, "You don't need to do that, just connect the cable. If the cable is live, you can leave, and I'll finish the rest myself." I gave him a final chance by explaining that the test would only take a few minutes, but if it didn't work, I wouldn't be able to come back for a few days. He was adamant absolutely not, he could handle it on his own. All right, then, if that's what he wanted, I'd let him. To make a long story short, the cable was indeed live, but the signal was coming from the local TV antenna instead of our internet cable. This was a relatively common issue back then in older residential buildings where wiring was often reused or patched to the wrong line. It wasn't too hard to fix once you knew what was wrong, but I could only imagine what he tried to do before finally calling our support center to schedule a return visit. 3 days later, I was back at his apartment, and this time I was greeted by his friendly wife, who had made some tea and thanked me for taking care of the problem. To wrap up the story, when a technician came to install my internet a few days ago, I made sure to offer him tea and encouraged him to take his time and do whatever he needed. We had a nice chat, and, funny enough, he shared a similar story. He had just explained to a junior colleague why simply checking if the cable is live isn't always enough.